anything about politics. My name is Jarrett, and I'm here to answer all of your questions about politics, regardless of how simple or complicated they might be. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this show is here to answer all of your simple or complicated questions about politics, and that way you got someone to help you out as you are learning this new language. There's a lot of shorthand that people use when they're talking about politics. What's up, V? Great to see you again. And so, if you're not familiar with that shorthand, if you don't know who these people are or what these words mean, it can be really difficult to keep abreast of what is going on in our government and in our country. So, that is what this show is here for. It is here to answer all of your questions about politics, regardless of how simple or complicated they might be. Let's see here. HLM says, Glory to Israel and the IDF. You have to ask a question or you're going to get blocked. HLM, just letting you know. You have one warning. So, yeah, welcome everybody. What's up, John Abbott? Great to see you again. Any questions about politics, just throw them in the chats and we will do our best to give you a great answer. This is not a show for fighting or harassing or bullying or debating. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. Patriots 147 says men's Olympic hockey team America's heroes. That's also not a question, so ask a question or you're going to get booted. Veet says, in class right now, getting ready for exam. Thoughts on the mortgage rates dropping below 6%? Did they, or are you asking me if it's going to at some point? Because I have no idea if there was news about the mortgage rates going down. What's up, Lauren? Great to see you again. Freddie Hearn says, name 3 countries outside of your own. Okay, Canada, Mexico, Australia. GSDM says, should we have open borders? I don't think so. Veet says they did apparently this morning. Interesting. Maybe they're trying to juice the housing market. I'm not really sure. Savage Ally says, what's going on with Minnesota? The Medicaid reimbursements being halted. This is just a political attack by the Trump administration. What they are doing is they are trying to make it seem as though there is some unprecedented amount of government involvement in these fraud trials that are going on over there. But these this example of this kind of fraud is happening in most states. And the only reason why the Trump administration are singling out Minnesota is because they see themselves having some political rivals there. The Somali immigrant community, Tim Walz, Ilhan Omar, they think that it is politically advantageous for them to start this fight with them. Brando says, what do you expect with our talks with Iran today? I've got no fucking idea. I don't really trust Trump to do a good job actually instituting peace. I think that him and Netanyahu and all of his buddies in the military industrial complex are really anxious to start firing some of those bombs and bullets that they've been paid for. So, yeah, I don't fucking know, man. I just know that I don't trust him. And, best case scenario is that we get some sort of Iran nuclear deal like we did with the Obama administration. It's probably going to be a worse deal, and we're going to have paid for a worse deal with a lot of taxpayer dollars. GSDM says, would you agree on a third party in the middle? No, I would not. I'm a progressive Democrat, so I don't really care for the middle. Matt says, do you not see immigration as a problem? I am not a Trump supporter nor an ICE supporter. No, I don't see immigration as a problem. Immigrants are a net positive on the country. Now, there are some difficulties depending on how many immigrants are coming and if they're concentrated in specific areas. If you live on the border and there are coyotes who are constantly smuggling scared immigrants through your backyard in the middle of the night, like, that's terrifying. Like, obviously we should do something about that. Yeah, it's not the problem that the Republican Party is making it out to be. They're lying to you, saying that your wages are down and costs are up because of immigrants, and that's untrue. All right, Fletch lives again. Great to see you again. Says, could Congress question Trump under oath? What would have to happen to make that happen? So, yes, they could, but there are tactics that Trump could use to try to delay that, that subpoena, basically. And we know that the Supreme Court is open to him using them for getting out of shit like this. So it's kind of like, they should do it. They should try to do it. And then where we see, Congress or the Supreme Court trying to equivocate or delay, then the American public needs to know about that so that we can then vote in a way to get rid of those people. Joe says, is hygiene political? Maybe. I haven't thought about it. Savage Alley says, thoughts on Jasmine Crockett? I like Jessamine Crockett a lot. Joe says, why was the Union speech so long, bruh? Because Trump is a narcissist who loves to hear himself talk. He's a liar who believes that the more he speaks his lies in front of a camera, the truer they become. Yeah, he's trying to torture all the Democrats that are in the audience. You know, yeah, it's a it was an assault on our ears. Dale Day says, just to let Iran have their nukes mutually assured destruction nuclear doctrine with Israel. I don't know if that's probably the best thing. Ivan Cisco says, I missed your live yesterday. What do you think the outcomes of Hillary's deposition will be? I don't imagine that there's going to be anything substantive in there. I saw some of her opening remarks and they seemed pretty on point. Yeah, it's just it's a question of whether or not the Trump administration will be able to successfully use these hearings as propaganda material, or if the American public won't fall for it. And so this guy just wrote Heil Hitler, so that's a block. Congratulations. Bradford says, why is Tallarico running against Crockett? She's great. Because that's what primaries are. Primaries are people in the same party, vying for the opportunity to be that party's nominee for that general election seat. I don't remember who declared first. I think Tallarico declared first. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, I think they're both great. But it's up to the people of Texas to vote for whoever. Yeah, I heard that that Crockett's doing great in the polling, but I don't know. We'll have to see. We'll have to see how that shakes out. What do you call it? How that shakes out in after the primary's over. Mad says, I'm sorry I had to respond to my mother, so I couldn't hear what you said. It was the immigration question. But I did a really long and good answer for that one, man. Oh, Mads. Oh my God. I want to answer your question again, but I did such a good job the first time. It's a little deflating. It's like when you write something and then you accidentally delete it and you're like, God damn it. That was what I wanted to say. Okay. Dale Dace, it's probably better to let Iran make their nukes. They'll have a nuclear deterrent. Yeah, I don't think that is a good... We should have fewer nuclear weapons, not more nuclear weapons, Dale Day. Odinson says, agree with Dems not standing for the mother of Irina Zarutska. Yeah, I don't think that the Democrats are obligated to participate in Trump's attempts at weaponizing the State of the Union and politicizing it. So yeah, I'm completely fine with them. The people that Trump brings to the State of the Union are being harmed more by his policies than they are being helped by his policies. And so I stand with the Democratic Party in not standing for Trump trying to politicize people that he is actively harming. Duke of Earl says 2026 midterm prediction. Political predictions aren't really valuable. My theory is that Dems people are going to want to vote for Dems more than Republicans, but the Trump administration and the Republican Party are going to try to do things to lie, cheat, and steal their way into either an electoral victory or just less of an electoral loss. So we all have to make sure that we work really hard to make sure that Trump and the Republican Party are not successful in that attempt. Muzz King and Triska, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. All right. Let's get over to some Twitch and YouTube questions real quick. Let's see here. JP says you forgot the country of Europe and Africa. Yeah, that's my bad. John Abbott says, with the Medicare fraud stuff, they're targeting autistic children. I haven't heard about that, John Abbott. That's fucking depressing as hell. All right, Ecuadorian, glad to see that you got a bunch of rest. Reminded me, have to keep my head up. Yeah, I appreciate you being here, Ecuadorian, and I'm glad that I could help be an inspiration and person moving you forward. Average Joe says, quote of the day, think of how stupid the average person is and realize half of them are stupider than that. That feels like a Carlin line. Is that a Carlin line? Let me know. All right, let's get back into these TikTok comments. Triska says, we'll be able to trust the elections under this administration. Yes, because states run elections. So there are certain things that you should be contacting your secretaries of state and your, local representatives about. If you have electronic voting machines that are being controlled by a MAGA company, if you are worried about the FBI coming in and stealing your voting machines, or ICE being used to intimidate voters, arrest voters, or close roads in Democratic areas, like those are 100% things that you should be talking to your Secretary of State and your local representatives about. But we don't have to trust that the Trump administration is going to administer this election fairly, because that is not the job of the federal government. It is possible that they try to federalize elections, but I think that it is unlikely that they are able to pass the SAVE Act or accomplish that. John says, how do you support Congresspeople who aren't born in the USA? It is legal for somebody to be elected to Congress, even if they're not a person who was born in America, John. Do you have a problem with that? Is there a reason why you think that that is a bad thing? Isaac, that is not a question about politics. Mads says, did you see that Trump made Texas mostly blue? I don't know if that's true, Mads. Riley Marfleets, his opinion on the current state of the current situation of the UK. I do not know enough about it to comment, unfortunately. Allie, great to see you again, says, but all of us heard your response and benefited even if you missed. All right, Mads, short answer is yes. I do not believe that immigration is a problem because immigrants are a net positive. Obviously, there can be problems with immigration depending on how many people are coming over. If you live on the border and you get terrified because coyotes working for the cartel are constantly sneaking terrified immigrants through your backyard at all hours of the night, like, yeah, those are problems that need to be solved. But, immigrants, by and large, are a net positive. Okay. So, yeah, I got reported for unverified claims, which is fucking bullshit, obviously. Right. Wise Guy says, what about Somalian? What about Somalian? Just Vibe says, what do you think about Iran? I support the citizens. I'm against the government. Savage Ally says, Texas has been mostly blue for decades if you look at population and not gerrymandering. I'll believe it when I see it, Savage Ally. I do believe that Democrats probably could do better in Texas if it were not for the massive voter suppression and gerrymandering that occurs there. But I think that Republicans still have an advantage. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's just the sense that I get based on polling, based on previous elections, etc., etc. All right, TikTok, I'm going to stop and restart because I was unjustly reported for misinformation, so or unverified claims, I should say. All right, so come right back on TikTok, everybody. I will be right back. It'll give me an opportunity to get to some of these TikToks, to some of these Twitch and other questions here. Okay, let's see here. Go back on the live stream. Go live. All right, let's get over to these. Okay, here we go. Alrighty. John Abbott says, based on some things he said last week, he spoke for so long to prove that he's not weak. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I buy that. John Abbott, Tellerica declared first when it was just him and Colin Allred, when Jasmine threw her head and Colin withdrew to make room for her. JP says, thoughts on Hegseth threatening Anthropic into using AI for domestic mass surveillance and AI-controlled weapons. Obviously, that is terrifying. I think that it is an indication that Anthropic is at least one of the better, moral AI companies. We're judging on a curve here because they're all kind of shit. Yeah, but it's also just like another indictment of the Trump administration and the Republican Party, that they're like, we're going to force an AI company to let us use AI in the most irresponsible way possible. Like, we could not hire sci-fi writers to think of a more irresponsible way to use artificial intelligence, and we are going to use the power of the federal government to force an AI company to let us do that. It's fucking psychotic, as is everything that they do. Average Joe says, as a Texan, I can confirm Texan voters are at best naive and at worst legitimately stupid, although to be fair, the overwhelming majority of voters are inherently irrational, so kind of tracks LOL. I'm not a Texan, I don't live in Texas, so I don't really know if I can speak to that. I generally am hostile to the idea of blaming voters for the people that they vote for and calling them like uninformed or biased or irrational or gullible. yeah, we just have to do a better job of communicating to those people, I think. Stargirl Lit says opinion on Texas being a blue state nearly 100%. I do not believe that's accurate, Stargirl Lit. But I would love it if it was. From your lips to God's ears. JP, good morning to you as well. Savage Ally, great to see you. All right, Average Joe says, how do Americans see ICE killings, detaining, starving, and abusing U.S. citizens and still believe Trump and the pedo co when they say they're only going after the worst of the worst? Is our media, social, and corporate really that echo chambered? 100% it is. And remember that all of these platforms are owned by billionaires. And so they are going to push narratives that help the billionaire class. And so continuing to divide us based on ideology, showing us different news depending on who we vote for. All of these propaganda narratives are extremely sophisticated and bespoke to every individual citizen. So yeah, we have to do the work of communicating this stuff, but we also have to take everything that we see on the internet with a massive grain of salt, because it is likely that it is all a fucking psyop. Triska, D. Scott, Aaron Gregory, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. For anybody who is just coming in, my name is Jarrett. I answer questions about politics. Everybody is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, some in the middle, some in the outskirts. We don't do fights here or bullying or anything of that nature. Stevie Mack says, then why are you on this billionaire class website? This is the easiest way for me to talk to lots of people. I am 100% sure that they are, nerfing my numbers because they don't like what I'm saying. But it is a valuable tool for me to reach lots of people, Stevie Mac. Kimberlina says, if country stays red, where would we be in 10 years? It's just going to, everything that is worse now than it was yesterday is going to be worse tomorrow. That is the Republican strategy, is make things worse so that people have to flock to private companies to solve problems. And so we're going to be spending all of our money and working like 5 or 6 jobs just to make sure that we have clean water and clean air and good food to eat and stuff like that. Aiden says, do you like Zohra Mamdani? I do. Keith Schultz says, Elon brought Ms. Ram to State of the Union. How much do taxpayers pay Ms. Ram to support her disability? I don't know, Keith, and I honestly don't really give a shit if my taxes go up 1 penny so that Ilhan Omar can bring somebody to the State of the Union. Savage Ally says, what is the scariest to you as a man about Party 2025, and what worries you the most for women? What worries me most is the consolidation of power play that they have in there, where they're going to turn the presidency into a dictatorship. And what worries me most for women is, the far right movement is not just trying to not advance women's equality and rights. They are actively trying to take them away. And so if you listen to people like Nick Fuentes, they will tell you things like women shouldn't be able to vote, women shouldn't be able to own property, have credit cards, stuff like that. And so I am worried about how this world will treat women if the Republican Party is successful. Tony Toothpick says, Democrats' views are so unpopular. That is inaccurate, Tony Tooth. Aiden says, would you vote Jalen Brunson for New York City mayor after Mamdani turns over? I don't know who Jalen is, Ada, so sorry. Sebastian Link says, do you believe in universal moral truths? To some extent. I think that we have to have a little wiggle room for, moral relativism, but, I think there are certain things that we should all be able to get behind. Triska Fawn says, do you know what Hillary Clinton said today? Why not public? I heard some of her opening remarks. They seem on point. More than that, I cannot say, unfortunately. Tony Toothpick says 30% approval for the Democratic Party. Well, the Republican Party is not doing much better. That's number one. And number two is approval rating does not indicate that people are unhappy with Democratic Party's views. They could be happy with them not working hard enough. They could be unhappy with the progressive wing, the centrist wing. They could be the victims of a massively funded, decades-long propaganda campaign to convince people that the Democratic Party is worse than it actually is. Tony Toothpick. Aiden says, was Charlie Kirk racist in your opinion? I think it's pretty obvious that he was. He said that if he got onto a plane and he saw that the pilot was black, he would be worried. And that seems to me a fundamentally racist opinion. Alrighty. JP says, according to voter registration, Texas is more blue. Democrats, we have 46% of Texas are registered Democrats and 37% are registered Republican. But that does leave 15% unaffiliated, which would more than make up for that gap. Yeah, I don't know. I find that to be, I guess where are those votes? Do Democrats? How many of those 8 million voters show up in every election? How many of those 6 million Republicans show up in every election? I don't know. I'm skeptical. Ola Vivid says, "Why is the U.S. blocking oil from Cuba? They are trying to make the Cuban people suffer so that they overturn their own government." Charlie says, "Ireland or Britain?" I don't really pick countries to be better than other countries. Jay says, "Texas is blue. It's just gerrymandered to hell." From your lips to God's ear, man. Hey guys, prove me wrong. Prove me that Texas is blue, guys. Charlie says, "Pick one." No. All right, let's see here. Thank you, Aiden. I appreciate that. Alrighty, let's get back over to Hall says also most of that unaffiliated vote Republican as someone from Texas. That tracks for me. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if you add, if you add that 3 million unaffiliated to the Republican column and you take into account voter suppression tactics, then you have a significant Republican advantage in Texas still. Alrighty, John Abbott says, "Thoughts on Kansas canceling trans people's driver's licenses in an election year? It will potentially mean that they can't vote." It is one more example of voter suppression tactics by the Republican Party. It is another mechanism by which they can harm the trans community, which is something that they really like doing. Yeah, it's fucking disgusting, man. Charlie says, "If you had to choose a colonially occupied country or a country that caused it, which one?" I guess I would pick the colonial occupied country, as I'm generally against colonialism. I am for the sovereignty of individual nations. Let's see here. Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate that. All right, welcome everybody to Ask Me Anything About Politics. My name is Jared, and I'm here to answer all your questions about politics, regardless of how simple or complicated they might be. I know politics can be really confusing when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So this is the place where you can ask all your questions about politics. No one's going to judge you for your question or roast you or try to debate you. I don't believe in debates. I don't find them productive, so I'm not here to fight with anybody or try to win any arguments. I am just here to answer all of your good faith questions about politics. Everybody's welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, or something on the outskirts. I am not here to fight you, and I'm not here to call you a fascist. Shit like that. Charlie says, "Over here, Republican is left-wing and Democrat is right-wing." What country is that? Australia? Wheatgrass says, "No judgment except yours," right? No, I don't judge people, Wheatgrass. Savage Alley says, "Do you think Trump is trying to replace NATO with his peace, whatever the hell?" Yeah, 100%. What Trump wants to do is replace every government agency with a Trump agency so that he can be in control of it. He can siphon money off of it. He's a con artist. He's a grifter, etc. Kimberlina says, "Young aggressive Republican or older, more experience-led aggressive Republican trying to figure out primary boy." Why are you voting in the Republican primary, Kimberlina? Are you a registered Republican? Diego Vargas says, "Will J.D. Vance hold the torch now?" I don't know who is eventually going to, inherit the throne once Trump is gone. I believe that JD is probably in the best position as VP to do that, but it seems like Trump is really enjoying pitting JD and Marco Rubio against each other. It's real fucking Succession shit, where all the children are secretly in competition with each other, and the father is constantly trying to stoke divisions between all of them. Okay, Thomas says, "Sick of politics. Why is Affleck Duck a goose?" I don't know. Kimberlina says, "One is young and aggressive. One is older and low key." Yeah, but are you registered Republican? Why are you voting in the Republican primary? Dancing Queen says, "We don't have thrones in the United States of America." I mean, I was being, I was being metaphorical, Dancing Queen. I was being figurative. But it is true that the Trump administration is trying to turn the presidency into a kinghood. Moho Pen says, "Will Trump RX provide savings?" No, they have a report about this out already. All of the Trump RX shit is bullshit. You can get cheaper versions of those drugs other places, and there's only like 42 available medications on there. It's nonsense. Do not do it. Do not endorse. Tracy Ring Bean says, "Will the letter sent to Kansas trying to give up the driver's license be struck down in the courts?" That I do not know. I have to wait and see how that turns out. If you want me to read a little bit more into it and try to answer you for tomorrow, Tracy, if you shoot me a DM, I will research it and then be able to talk about it. Let's see here. Chud says, "Do you support the Palestinian people?" Yes, I do. Charlie says, "What are big Catholic left-wing groups in America?" I have no idea. Rico says, "If they repeal the 14th Amendment, how will that affect all Americans?" Let's see here. Let's get you that answer in just a second. If they repeal the 14th Amendment, it will be a tool that the Republican Party uses to try to threaten people to toe the line and not dissent by threatening with removing their citizenship. Right, Arliss says, "What do you think about Trump claiming Greenland?" Well, he's a psychopath. Cav says, "Will Tallarico win?" Nobody knows. Black Trump supporter says, "Do you see what's happening in Mexico right now with the cartel? ICE stock just went up." I do not believe that what ICE is doing is hurting the cartel at all. And as far as I can tell, the cartel violence has stopped. Maddie KK says, "What do you think about Iran right now?" I'm for the citizens. I'm against the government. Chud says, "Are you from Crown Heights?" No, I am not. Peter says, "What do you think of Nick Fuentes?" Nick Fuentes, by his own words, Nick Fuentes describes himself as a racist, as misogynist, as prejudiced, and as a person affiliated with the Schnazi ideology. And so I think that those are terrible characteristics. So, yeah, I don't like him. Arliss says, "Already think you are a great guy. Have a good day." Thank you, Arliss. Says, "Are you left or right?" I am left. Savage Ally says, "What can citizens do about Pam Bondi other than obviously vote and call our representatives?" The same thing that we do about everything, Savage Ally. So it's boycott, strike, protest, political pressure on elected representatives, business leaders, billionaires, corporations, etc. We have to vote for people who will hold these people accountable. We have to convince other people to vote for people that will hold these people accountable. We have to increase voter participation. We have to recruit more people to the cause of convincing other people to vote. There's a whole bunch of work to do. Diego Vargas says, "Will Susan Collins lose? She's the biggest hypocrite in Washington." I mean, I don't like Susan Collins either, so hopefully the voters in Maine will do the right thing and vote for whoever the Democrat is that wins the primary over there. Let's see here. TDS Urgent Care says, "These people are crazy." That's not a question. Velo says, "I wish more would be as honest as Nick Fuentes, and I still dislike him." I do not believe that Nick Fuentes is honest, Velo. Check out PolitiFact. Check out how PolitiFact rates Nick Fuentes, and then get back to me. Savage Ally says, "Do you think she will face any repercussions for outing victims?" Not with the current breakdown of the government, and not without massive political pressure from the citizens. Diego Vargas says, "Will a Democrat win Marjorie Taylor Greene's former seat?" I don't know. I haven't even seen any polling on that. Beef Flap says, "Will we have Social Security benefits in 50 years? If we vote out the politicians who have been crippling Social Security by removing funds, then we will have Social Security. But if we allow the Republican Party to continue to get rid of all of these programs that we've already paid into, then it will disappear." Rico John says, "Is legacy media owned by rich billionaires?" Yes, but also social media as well. Alrighty, excellent questions, everybody. Welcome. My name is Jared. I answer questions about politics. Everybody is welcome here, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, or something on the outskirts. TDS Urgent Care says, "Who are you?" My name is Jared. I answer questions about politics. You're welcome, B Flaps. Thank you for asking a question. All right, let's get back over to the Twitch comments. Average Joe says, "What's your opinion of dark woke?" I would never insult someone for a part of themselves they have no control over. I am empathetic, understanding, and respectful towards everyone, but treats them the same. But if someone is bigoted, MAGA dick head, I have no hesitation being insulting towards them and whatever physical attributes they may be insecure about. I view we should be targeting these people for the legitimately evil things that they do and not the fact that they are, in a wheelchair or fat or ugly or whatever. If there are people on the left who engage in that, like famously Jasmine Crockett called the governor of Texas Governor Hot Wheels, and that was obviously hilarious, but a little insensitive to people with physical disabilities. And so, I think generally speaking, we want to avoid it. Maybe amongst your small circle of friends, you can indulge in it every once in a while, like a little piece of candy. You don't want that to be your entire diet. Yeah, and if you are that thing, then you are allowed to make fun of that thing. So if you are in a wheelchair, you are allowed to say Governor Hot Wheels. If you are not, you are not. That's just my philosophy on that. Okay, let's see here. Miz gonna be all right someday. Says Abbott calls himself Hot Wheels. He does? Oh, I don't like that. It's not fun unless it's bothering him. Buffalo Trucker says everyone is a hypocrite. Maybe, but some people are bigger hypocrites than other Buffalo Trucker. And I would encourage you not to paint everybody with the same brush, because when you do, you give cover for the worst ones. Kimberlina says meant representative, not Republican. Tried to abbreviate his that makes a lot of sense, Kimberlina. I guess, yeah, is there anyone that vibes with you more? I generally like the younger, more progressive candidates. But yeah, what's the rub there? I can't remember what the comment was. Real Bendis says, do you agree that Nick Fuentes and the Groypers are extremely dangerous more than Trump? I don't know if I would rate them more or less dangerous than Trump, but they're definitely dangerous. They are an extremist wing of an already very extreme Republican Party. So yeah, we need to keep our eyes on them, and we got to replace the leadership of the FBI so that we can stop them from potentially doing violence. Okay, let's see here. John Abbott says Nick Fuentes can be completely honest and still be wrong about everything. That is accurate, John Abbott, but I also think that he's a liar. I'm pretty confident that he's a liar. Without having checked PolitiFact, I'm pretty confident that he's a liar. What's up? It's the Rocketeer. Great to see you again. Savage Alley says, do you personally have political aspirations? No, I do not. Rico John says, are women's rights under attack? Yes, 100%. Timmy says, Stein, question mark. I'm going to ask you not to refer to my Jewish last name going forward, Timmy. Kimberlina says, younger, more aggressive is my top pick, just hesitant with lack of experience in any political office. Yeah, the lack of experience doesn't bother me as much. I really do think that the Democratic below the president ticket, we need to start representing younger Americans. And so, yeah, I would generally always go for the younger candidates. Leo says, what is your opinion about fascism? I'm against it. I don't know what the name of that symbol is. What's the name of the line that's like a dash, but it's curved like that? Anybody? That person asks, is populism anti-democratic and why? I do not believe that it is. Sonny Milek says, do you believe capitalism is compatible with democracy? Yeah, I mean, we've had capitalism and democracy for a long time. It's called a tilde? I was never going to get that. So, yeah, I mean, we obviously need to regulate. We actually need to regulate capitalism. Otherwise, we have massive conglomerates and hyper-monopolization and no actual real market competition, shit like that. Tilde. Everybody's tilde. Tilde. Some people say tilde. Some people say tilde. Some people say tilde. 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 I like tilde because it sounds like a tithe almost. Jacob Vargas says, Democrat autopsy revealed Kamala lost because of Gaza. They haven't learned anything from that. Diego Vargas, we don't know that. I believe the reporting says that it was a factor, but not that it was the factor. I could be wrong. Because again, I don't think we've actually seen the report. I think people are just talking about what they read in the report. And as far as like not learning anything from it, I completely disagree with that, because there are a record number of Democrats, more than have ever done before so, that are voting against sending money and weapons to Israel. So, the ones that have learned their lesson have learned their lesson, and the ones that, quote unquote, haven't learned their lesson, potentially there is a reason, a substantive, good faith reason why they are doing that. It might not just be that they are a bunch of corporate shills who are owned by Netanyahu and, what do you call it? Netanyahu and AIPAC. Christian says, why did Democrats vote against lowering the taxes for people making less than $200,000? Democrats did not do that, Christian. Democrats have lowered taxes for the 99% consistently, and the Republicans consistently raised taxes on the 99% and cut them for the top 0.1%. Okay. Serzo AI says, why do you think Democrats keep resorting to name calling and using lies to rile up the people? They don't do that, Serzo. The Republican Party does that a lot, but I don't know what you're referring to when you say using lies to rile up people or name calling. All right, scrolling down. Christian says Democrats voted against making the tax cuts from 2017 permanent. They 100% did that. Yes, because those tax cuts were primarily for the top 0.1%, Christian. So I stand with the Democratic Party in the fact that they are saying we do not accept the crumbs that you are throwing to the 99% in service of giving a $1 billion tax giveaway to the wealthiest among us. Christian says those tax cuts included cutting taxes for people making less than $20,000 a year. Yeah, but they were crumbs, Christian. It seems clear to me, Christian, that you have this idea that you want to press. So all right, yeah, you're out of here. I don't fight, Christian. See you later. Rocky Road says that's all Democrats do is stir up lies and hate. That is inaccurate, Rocky Road. Sophia, great to see you again, says if the U.S. did become socialist, do you still think the private sector should have freedom or all of government? I mean, that depends on what you mean by socialist, Sophia. Like, I think if you ask 100 people to describe what a 100% socialist, totalitarian socialist American government would look like, you would get 100 different answers. And so, yeah, I honestly don't know how to answer that question because I think it's easier to answer the question, can you have socialized government programs and also private industry? In which case I would say yes. Okay. Grant Lindahl says, what's cooler, Space Force or Doge? I guess Space Force, but I don't know too much about the Space Force. I just know that Doge sucked balls. Sarzo says, damn, so you're a liberal? I'm a lefty. I'm a progressive Democrat, whatever you want to call me. Travel says, it's like Trump supporters don't see the names Trump calls people. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting how they just kind of, they just kind of show them what they want to see, Kusei says, remember when they said Joe Biden was mentally okay? Okay. Grant Lid says, I'm just fucking with you, lol. All right. Travel says, you say he is a liberal like it's a bad thing. Caring about others is not a bad thing. Yeah, I generally agree with that. Nicholas Kroll says, what three things have Trump and the GOP done that are so bad that it's not worth arguing other points? Let's see here. They are not training ICE and CPB officers, and so a bunch of people have died because of it. They have killed regulation and oversight. They have killed balance of powers and checks and balances. They are allowing Trump to have a crypto coin by which he is accepting billions of dollars in bribes. Trump is stealing our tax dollars, putting it directly into his pocket and the pocket of all his billionaire buddies. They are ignoring American law, international law, human rights. Yeah, there's like a lot of things. Okay, Brian says, in Sweden we have 8 main parties and generally none of them are good. Well, sorry to hear that. Real Benda says, do you think AOC fumbling answer on 21 hurts her chances for being president? I don't really think people are even going to remember that by the end of this year, let alone by the end of 27. All right, let's see here. All right, Kusei says Republicans have better principles. I disagree with that, Kusei. Can you name me one principle that Republicans have that is better than Democrats? Sarzo says, you guys want AOC as president? I think she'd be a pretty good president. Sarzo, is there a reason why you think that she wouldn't be? Alexander says, do you think reform is good? If you mean the Reform Party in the UK, no, I do not. I do not agree with far-right extreme parties. Kusei says fiscal responsibility. I think it's really weird that you believe that the Republican Party is the party of fiscal responsibility, considering the fact that the deficit always goes up higher under Republicans than Democrats, that they have overseen the last 3 economic collapses in this country, that the last time we had a budget balanced and a financial surplus was under a Democratic president, Kusei. So I don't understand where that idea comes from, that you think the Republican Party is the party of fiscal responsibility. Kusei says the principle of Republicans is still more fiscal. Yeah, but they don't govern like that, Kusei. Like, I can say that I'm the party of fiscal responsibility, but then if I crash the stock market more often than I don't, and I fucking explode the deficit, we owe more money now than we have ever before in American history, and that is largely because of Donald Trump. So again, the things you're saying don't make any sense, Kusei. Captain Cam says, we need a truly left-wing party in America. We do. It's the Democratic Party. Kusei says, red states have less debt. That's because they take money from blue states, Kusei. Let's see here. Wyatt says, Reaganomics does not work. That is accurate. Let's see here. Sarazo AI says, Jesus Christ, well, at least that means Republicans will win again. You didn't really answer my question, Sarazo. You're in question jail. If you don't ask a question, then you are out of here. Sophia says, would you still support ICE if it was reformed to operate in a more ethical way? Yeah, I would. I don't have a problem with the idea of what ICE is. It's just that they have never ever lived up to that ideal, and in fact, they've only gotten worse. Alrighty, enough already. 84 says, don't pay Satan's chosen Rothschild. That really seems like some anti-Semitic shit, so I'm getting rid of that. Okay, Real Bendis says, do you think AOC fumbling answer is indicative of her intellect or just a bad moment? I mean, I think that she was taking her time to try to answer an extremely complicated foreign policy question. Enough already says, ICE is booting out SWA. No, they're murdering civilians. They're detaining people illegally. They are torturing people. And while I have not seen any reporting about this, I'm pretty confident that there is sexual assault happening in all of those ICE detention facilities. Okay. Alrighty, let's get back into here. Okay. Average Joe says, when I was streaming last week, I had a viewer ask me like 6 times why I have a problem with voters having to prove citizenship when they vote. I kept saying that's not the point. It's just to create more potential points of failure. I finally asked him if I needed to slow down so he could have more time to process the information. He stopped asking after that, LOL. Yeah, I think it's important to recognize when people aren't here in good faith. You know, when I answer your question and then you act like I did not answer your question, then, you know, I no longer need to engage with you, you know, because you're not here for substance. Wyatt says, thoughts on Tallarico? I like Tallarico a lot. Kimberlina says, what is SWA? Somalians with attitude? Yeah, probably. Real Bendis says, have you started your comedy tour yet? No, I have not. There's a possibility that I'm going to be doing some dates with Steve in Europe in July, but that's a big maybe. But after that, the next time that I will 100% be on the road will be late November. Diego Vargas says, will China try to annex Taiwan in the near future? There has been some reporting coming out from military higher-ups saying that that is likely going to happen. Savage Alley says, I'm so torn between Crockett and Tallarico. Well, what do you like about the two of them, and what do you don't like about the two of them, Savage Ally? Maybe I can help you with this. I can tell you how I feel, but, you know, I think it's probably better to try to tailor the response to the things that are important to you, instead of just trying to say, like, do what I want you to do, you know? Sophia says, but if ICE didn't exist, what would the solution be? Because before 03, deportations were less effective. I don't know if that's accurate, Sophia. You know, ICE, again, is a pretty young agency. We were doing deportations. You know, if there were fewer deportations, it's probably just because we had less money going towards deportations. Wyatt says, Crockett or Tallarico? I think Tallarico is a future president. I like Tallarico a little bit more. I've seen some reporting that he has more progressive bona fides than Jasmine Crockett. I like his strategy better than I like Jasmine Crockett's strategy. But again, I think they're both great. I think that Texas can't go wrong voting for either one of them. Carlo was right, says, is there any movement in regulating misinformation on social media in the Democratic Party? Yeah, there is. I don't know if it's if anything has been like codified, or if there are any groups that are, you know, officially within the Democratic Party that's their main thing. But that is a tenet of the Democrats' platform. Rocky Road says, can only listen to you for so long it gets nauseating. All right, well, leave whenever you got it, you know. Tamo Sorrel says, what's your opinion on if a German nuclear weapon would really be necessary? I mean, we should be working towards nuclear disarmament, not nuclear proliferation. Okay, oh boy. 22 Purple says, I know this isn't a politics question, but how would you recommend someone to start with doing comedy? Go find an open mic. Start writing a whole bunch of jokes, even if you have nobody to tell them to. You know, where you live has a lot to do with what opportunities you have. but just get stage time. If there's no open mic, start an open mic. Savage Ally says, need her to be, and he does a better job of keeping his cool. Need her to be. Need her to be. I don't know what that means. Let's see here. Better job of keeping his cool. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, can you rephrase that, Savage Ally? Crazy D says, America needs to stop destabilizing other countries and they won't need to flee the U.S. I love that. Juan Senation says, Vance, no chance to be president. That's very funny. Wyatt says, I think Tallarico is much more unifying than Crockett. He has a great appeal to both sides of the aisle. I like that about him also. Jacob Vargas says, thoughts on China annexing Taiwan? I'm against it. We don't recognize them as a country, but treat it as such. Yeah, I don't know where the political pressure is to keep people from recognizing Taiwan as a sovereign nation, but it seems clear that we are respecting it as a sovereign nation. So, why not? Alex G says, can you explain what you believe is driving higher energy costs across the United States? The Trump administration is killing green energy projects that were just giving people cheap energy for free. AI data centers and Bitcoin mining operations are soaking up all the electricity, which is making electricity have to operate on a premium. We are propping up the fossil fuel industry with subsidies, and they are just jacking up the prices regardless. There's a quick little taste of reasons. Okay, Savage Ally says it's in 2 comments. Yeah, but I looked for the other comment to explain the first comment. I couldn't find it. Okay, let's see here. Hina says, did you hear about what Trump did to redefine professional degrees? What do you think? That happened a while ago, Hina, and I don't remember all the specifics, but I do remember that it was basically a fuck you to a bunch of working class Americans. Like, there are a ton of people who benefit. There are a ton of benefits from being able to categorize yourself as a professional or having a professional degree that are now gone. For people like nurses, I believe. Nitya Olmo says, read any good books recently? Yeah, I read a great book called Giving Up is Unforgivable. Highly recommend. It's written by somebody. The author's name is Vance, no relation to JD. Carlin was right, says, I don't believe that Democrats need to worry about working with Republicans anymore. Yeah, generally speaking, I think that's accurate, but I think that we need to not give up on convincing Republican voters. Working with the Republican Party, I think the Republican Party has burned every bridge and wasted every modicum of trust that they had built up. And so I do not believe that we need to give them the benefit of the doubt ever again. But engaging with and convincing Republican voters to not vote for Republicans going forward, I think is still something that we should all be actively doing. Cal says, what do you think we should do about all the Epstein Files criminals not being prosecuted? We need to vote for people who will not be a part of a massive cover-up of one of the largest and most terrible child sex trafficking schemes in, American history. Thumberther says, I like that Jasmine is more aggressive towards opposition, which is needed to be a Democrat in Texas. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. If we could run 2 parallel simulations between Jasmine Crockett winning the primary versus Tallarico winning the primary, it is my belief that Tallarico would have a stronger strategy in being a convincing kind of a person as opposed to a just get out the vote kind of person. But, I could be wrong about that. Right, D. Gregory says, it was also cited that these politicians marked as no longer professional are reporting positions for, I don't know what that means. Hina says, I noticed something about it, but I don't want to sound like crazy woke or sensitive if I say it. You can go ahead and say that. We don't judge people here for being too far to the left or too far to the right. Zombie Mania says, yeah, we got born into an Epstein world. What the fuck, LOL. Yeah, for real, man. Hina says, I noticed he's targeted many female-dominated fields. Not saying it's misogyny, but it seems close. I think it is safe to say that it is misogyny. We have 1,000 examples of Trump being misogynistic. We have 1,000 examples of Republican politicians hyping up misogynistic policies. If you are a misogynist, being a Republican voter does not mean that you're a misogynist, but if you're a misogynist, you most likely vote for Republicans. Alrighty. D. Gregory says, reporting for abuse. Can you tell me what I did that was abuse, D. Gregory? Logan Slee says, why did Democrats not stand up when Trump said stand up if you want to protect U.S. citizens? Because Trump was actively trying to weaponize the State of the Union against the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party was not going to play that game. So I think that's completely fine for Democrats to not stand as Donald Trump is trotting people out and trying to gain political points off of them, despite the fact that his policies are hurting them more than Democratic policies ever did. Alex G says, is regulating emissions faster than implementing new cleaner sources of energy? Not a cause. Is regulating emissions faster than implementing new cleaner sources of energy? Not a cause. No, 100% not. And I think you can tell that based on the fact that these energy costs are going up during the Trump administration and not during the Biden administration. Let's see here. Good afternoon, Italiana. Logan Slee says, isn't that because they're the problem? Who's the problem? Jay Stagg says, Democrats hate the actual citizens. That is inaccurate, and also that's not a productive comment, so I'm just going to go ahead and boot you right now. Right, JP says, I posted Discord about SA and ICE. They have names for non-camera areas. There are hundreds of reports now. So there are hundreds of reports of sexual assault happening in ICE detention facilities. Wow. Thank you for posting that, JP. I got to go make sure that I read up on that. Right. Average Joe says, did you know Texas has a budget surplus of 40 to 60 billion, yet they continue to cut public school funding and pass constitutional amendments to prevent future wealth taxes? Want to guess which economic group contributes the most to that surplus? Hint, they're most affected by sales tax and property tax increases. That's really interesting, Average Joe. I wonder what the point is of having that budget surplus. I'm really curious about that. And I also want to check those numbers because it doesn't seem... If I had to guess if Texas had a budget surplus knowing that they have a regressive tax structure, I would say that they did not. But yeah, I need to look into that a little bit more. User, a whole bunch of numbers, says, are you Democrat or Republican? I'm a Democrat. Mel says, are you worried about the midterms being interrupted and why? I am worried because I know that Trump and Stephen Miller and the Republican Party in general are going to do a bunch of very shady and illegal things to try to win the midterms, try to steal and cheat and lie their way into electoral victory in the midterms. And so we are going to have to do a lot of work to try to stop that from happening. I'm not worried about him just like declaring elections canceled or trying to write an executive order that federalizes elections. I don't think he's going to be able to accomplish that. But it is possible that he, tells the FBI to seize voter machines or vote files or something. It's possible that ICE tries to intimidate voters or close down roads on the way to polling locations in Democratic areas. There's a lot of things they could do. So we just have to be vigilant, and we have to call our representatives and make sure, our local representatives, and make sure that they are prepared, that they have contingency plans for all of this shit that Trump is going to try to do. Alex G says, shutting down Indian Point, becoming dependent on Quebec hydro and LNG has increased costs for New York State. Don't know what that means. User a bunch of numbers. I already answered that one. What do you think about Dems not standing up when Trump asked people to stand for America first? Trump is full of shit. Trump doesn't give a shit about Americans. He was saying, let's protect Americans over immigrants. And as he is saying that is his priority, he is hurting American citizens because he believes that that's the right way to get at immigrants. Like, it doesn't make any sense, ICE and CBP are illegally detaining, torturing, sexually assaulting, and murdering people. And Trump is trying to tell us that those are the people that we actually care about. Those citizens that he is rounding up and detaining illegally and murdering in some cases. So yeah, I think they were right to sit because he's full of shit. If he's full of shit, you must sit, as they say. All right, I love BBL says, what is your favorite part of politics? I guess if I can actually convince people to be more interested and involved in politics so that we can increase voter turnout so that our politicians can be better going forward, like that would be a good thing, Pihu says, do you think the SAVE Act will pass Congress? I do not. It's possible, but I don't think that is going to happen. Sonia Dabas, how come Stephen Miller still has a job? Stephen Miller is the most powerful person in the government right now. He is the shadow president and the shadow head of the Department of Justice and the shadow head of Homeland Security. Like, Trump joked about how there was no place for him to promote Stephen Miller to because he's making all the decisions, basically. So, yeah. Could Stephen Miller fire himself? Potentially. But yeah, Trump fucking loves what Stephen Miller is doing. Kimberlina says the option was American citizens or humanity. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. 50-50. I think I know what you're saying there, Kimberly. I'm pretty sure I agree with you. Chooch976 says, do you think the alternative state of the union involving costume frogs was a good look for Democrats? Alternate state of the union involving costume frogs was a good look for Democrats. Yeah, because those specific costume frogs are a symbol of the resistance movement against the Republican Party and the Trump administration. It's Ilana says, what is Trump still doing in office? That's the question. LOL. Completely agree. I see you. Doodle says, how do you feel about Donald Trump? One, change birds in Archie and Africa together. I don't like Donald Trump, and I don't know what the second part of your question means at all. User a bunch of numbers says, so if Trump didn't ask the question, should people have stood up? I mean, it's a trick question, basically. You know, he's trying to make it seem like what he's doing is putting the American citizens above immigrants and not vice versa. He is claiming that the Democratic Party is putting immigrants above American citizens, and that is a lie. That is misinformation. It is a bullshit narrative, and I do not believe in engaging with bullshit narratives. You know, they say you should never fight a pig in the mud because the pig is used to it and they're having a good time in there. So I forget how the phrase goes, but yeah, that's basically what that is. Mel says, plans for Cuba, war or worse. I think right now what they're trying to do is destabilize the country so that the citizens remove the current government. And then there's going to be turmoil and civil war, potentially. I don't know if they have any plans for military involvement at the moment. I think they're just trying to cause it to be a failed state like Haiti. Ooh, ready. Average Joe says, did you see Stephen Miller's Twitter feud with Jon Favreau last night? He sounded like the DM of Hitler's D&D campaign, LOL. I didn't hear about that feud. But yeah, I'm confident that those two are constantly going at it with each other. And yeah, I think that was a fair hit on Stephen Miller's stupid fucking tweets, you know? These comments are coming too fast. Jeffrey Shelton says, FBI interviews with victim of Trump are missing. That is 100% accurate. The federal government under Trump and Republicans is currently engaged in a massive cover-up of people that were involved in a sex trafficking ring, a child sex trafficking ring. And the Trump and his Republican Party, who are in charge of the government, and the DOJ and the FBI are covering it up. Diego Vargas says, if they reform the Constitution to allow Trump a third term, do you think Obama could beat him? I would not. I do think Obama could beat him. I do not have faith that they would write that in a way that would make Obama viable as well. They would write something like, you know, candidates named Trump are allowed to run for a third or run for infinite terms. Okay, that Tiag says, what's your opinion on the Tempe situation? I don't know what that is. Let's see here. Scrolling up. Thank you, Mel. Scrolling up. User says, but in general, do Democrats support America first or illegal immigrants or all people? I think they support all people. I don't know how valuable or productive the phrase America first is because it is so obviously a MAGA slogan. It was also the slogan of the American Nazi Party during World War II. So I think that's probably a really interesting fact that everybody should remember. Every time they hear a MAGA person say America first, they are basically repeating the main slogan of the American Nazi Party during World War II. Seems pretty interesting. Seems pretty precious. Seems pretty important to keep in mind. Oh, excuse me. But the idea that we should be taking care of our citizens before we take care of anybody else it's not a bad philosophy to have. It's just that the Republican Party doesn't abide by it. The Republican Party is saying we shouldn't send money to USAID. We should use that money on American citizens instead. But then they don't use that money for American citizens. They just give it to the billionaire class. Jack says, typical Stein. That's an anti-Semitic comment, so you are out of here. Logan Sleet says, I know people are talking about Trump on the Epstein files, but what about Bill Clinton? I don't know how much he's represented in those files. It would track if he was, but I haven't seen any reporting to suggest that he was. Italiana says, are we seeing a slight shift of Supreme Court to do the right thing and not let Trump have his way? No, I do not believe that we should be giving them any credit whatsoever. They have already ruled for him in completely psychotic ways. On the rare times when they don't, I don't think that we should give them any flowers or a cookie. And somebody else pointed out recently that sometimes the courts do this in authoritarian regimes to appear more nonpartisan and objective. They will strike down something that the president tried to do, but then not rule on what happens next, not rule on enforcement. They famously did not say, and therefore every American gets a refund of all the surplus money that they spent, or every company gets a surplus. No, those companies have to forward those savings onto the consumer. It's just it is just more ability for them to do that stupid shit that they are always doing. Okay. Logan Slee says, I found pictures of Clinton on the files. Okay, so it is true that there were pictures of Bill Clinton in the files that the Department of Justice released. But it is also true that the Department of Justice had been found to Photoshop pictures of Bill Clinton and put them in the files to make them look as though they were nefarious. And my live just got tagged for misinformation. I would love it if somebody could show me what I said that was misinformation. Yeah. So I'll believe it when I see some substantive reporting on that, Logan. But again, I don't really. I'm not caping for Bill Clinton. I just haven't seen any evidence yet. Ernest Davis says they should give it to communities instead of Israel or Argentina or the rich. Completely agree with that, Ernest David. I would love it if Republicans did that. Alrighty. Ernest David says MAGA snowflakes. Agree. Rem says these MAGA folks report all the time. Yeah, And the fact that TikTok is now owned and operated by a Trump fan means that I no longer have a button where I can appeal those decisions. They just believe the people that report me for misinformation or bullying or whatever. And then, my shit gets hurt in the algorithm. So support this show to say fuck you to those guys. Triska, Muzzking, thank you so much for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. And we are at an hour, so we're going to start wrapping things up. We'll do a little high bear at the end, just for funsies. All right, let's see here. Carlin was right, says no love lost for me with the Clintons. Totally agree with that. Should have been black flagged after what he did to Lewinsky. Completely agree with that. Sacred Mischief Divine Rebel says, I don't know about all time. Let's not forget people like the Babylonians and the Romans. Let's say, what do you call it? Let's say recent history. If we want to make, claims about how bad the Epstein child sex trafficking ring was, then yeah, we could say in modern times. The Fixer Mike says, you're getting famous, my guy. I don't think I am. My channel is consistently growing, but very slowly, and I'm not mad at it. But it could be happening faster for my fucking money. I don't really give a shit about being famous. I just want to get this information out to as many people as I possibly can. Pihu says, how do you feel about the Heritage Foundation calling anti-Zionism anti-American? The Heritage Foundation is a extremely right-wing organization. The current government of Israel is extremely right-wing, and ergo, they are in league with each other. War helps the people who fund the Heritage Foundation, so they are all about that. Thank you, Mia. I appreciate that. Chris says, do we need to change the news media, or how come media is not challenging these people hard enough? I think that we do. I think that there needs to be many, many different types of reform in order for people to be able to trust the mainstream news going forward. I think these massive conglomerates need to be broken apart. I think we need to be subsidizing them so that they are not, swayed by the profit motive. Perhaps bringing back the fairness doctrine, regulations for news organizations that put out misinformation on purpose and shit like that. Yeah, there's a lot. Sixer says, next No Kings protest. The next No Kings protest is in about a month. It is in about a month, and it is March 28th. I will be there, Saturday, March 28th. Okay, D, 1961 says, just to clarify, I did not report you. I was citing the professional designation removed were for required reporters of child abuse, pedophile, rape, spousal abuse. I was citing the professional designation removed were for required reporters of child abuse. Yeah, I don't know what you're talking about, D. Sorry. Alrighty. Ooh, Tooch says, if the SAVE Act is supported by 80% of Americans, why do you think Democrats are fighting it so hard? Tooch, that is a really good question. Are you still here, Tooch96? Can you leave me another comment in the chat so I can know that I am speaking to an actual person still? Tooch, let me know, because I really do want to answer that question. And Piha from Finland, great to see you. Great to see you. Legendary Pain says, should we abolish ICE? Yes. Dissun says, are you right or left? I am left. Pihu, thank you. I appreciate that. Jake says, do you support ICE? No, I do not. Jenna says, Kansas revoking driver's licenses from trans residents. What are your thoughts? It is a voter suppression tactic. It is also a way of penalizing people for being trans. So it's really shitty. It's extremely shitty. Falling Box says, why are there no peace protests happening? There are. There are tons of protests that are happening in regarding the Trump administration regularly. Chewbacca says, do you see a blue midterm wave to make Trump a lame duck? I do, but we have to be careful because Trump and the Republican Party are going to try to lie, cheat, and steal their way into electoral victories. So we need to be on the phone with our local representatives and ask them to make sure that they have contingency plans for all of the things that Trump and Republicans could possibly do to steal ballots, suppress the vote, etc., etc. Cinos, the Spiky Bear, says, yeah, America the last year and during election has looked scary and falling into fascism. That's why we do the work, my guy. That is why we do the work. Jake says, do you support voter ID mandate? No, I do not. Thank you, D. I appreciate that. And Tooch, you're still here. Fantastic. All right, since I had a question on TikTok about voter ID, and I got a question about the SAVE Act on YouTube. We're going to be talking about that real quick. Jake, I'm answering that right now. And person whose name is a bunch of emojis, I'm doing that right now. Okay, so why is the SAVE Act bullshit? Why is voter ID bullshit? Here's the full version, right? Here we go. There is no problem that voter ID solves. Voter fraud happens in such small amounts that even right-wing organizations like Heritage investigating it found that in 50 years, there were only something like 50 cases of voter fraud. Not like 50 cases of thousands of people voting illegally. 50 individual cases of people voting illegally, and most of those people who were doing it were not undocumented immigrants. So why does the Republican Party want voter ID? And I'm not talking about the voters. I am talking about the politicians. And because the people, individual citizens, can be tricked into thinking that voter ID is a good idea, but it's not. Why do Republican Party politicians want there to be voter IDs? Because it is a voter suppression tactic. When you are forcing people to get an ID to be able to vote, you are forcing them to go to the DMV, which takes a lot of time and energy. And the Republican Party has shut down DMVs in Democratic areas to make it harder for them to get those IDs that they need to vote. Additionally, IDs are not free. And so if you are somebody who is struggling to pay the bills and you're being told that you have to pay $60 or $80 or whatever to get an ID, and you got to sacrifice an entire day and a half to go into the DMV and driving all the way the fuck out there and getting it, then that person is probably going to be like, all right, well, it's just easier for me not to vote then. All right, so to everybody who asked about the SAVE Act and voter ID in my chat, tell me what you think about what I just said. I want to make sure you heard me. There are people who will hear what I just said and then will respond with like, I don't understand why it's such a big deal to get an ID. And I'm like, all right, well, I just told you, that there's no need for it. And also it is a tool by which the Republican Party can suppress the vote. So that's the short version. Falling Box says, if the government provides ID to all, would you support it? I still wouldn't support it, but I would be fine with it. That seems to me like a good compromise. Make IDs free and easy to get, and you can have voter ID wherever you want. That is my compromise with people that have a real fucking boner for voter ID for some reason. Bihu says, would it be safe for me to call my representative as a minor and an immigrant? As a minor, yes. As an immigrant, I do not know. I think it really depends on which state and which representatives, because there are certain representatives out there who, when they hear that there's an immigrant in their midst, they will send ICE over to you. And so you got to be really careful. Crazy BB says, you're making it sound like everyone has to go get a new ID. Most Americans already have one. Yeah, but the people who don't. Crazy baby. And they're not free. Again, it being hard to get an ID is one reason why we should not have voter ID. Right, user a bunch of numbers says everyone should have an ID. All right, make them free. Lad of PK says, I like the free ID idea. You need one for everything as an adult. No, you don't. You can exist. In fact, the number of times I spend an entire fucking week without showing my ID to anybody is multitudinous. RK says you have to have specific ID and or paperwork. That is accurate. Ms. is going to be all right says, my real ID in Florida doesn't have my citizenship status on it. I think if it is a real ID, then it is evidence of your citizenship. I could be wrong about that. Ms. is going to be all right someday. So double check that. Rem V73 says, state driver's license is inadequate under the SAVE Act. I believe that is accurate. Haas Design says, nothing is free. That's not true. Some things are free. Having a nice conversation with my wife is free. Going on a walk is free. Brooklyn says, help me understand why 48% of youth voters still support Trump. Of YouTube voters. Is that what YT is? I think it's YouTube voters. And what are the other half doing to help fix? So Brooklyn, I believe that we have seen evidence that the YouTube algorithm pushes right-wing content. So it makes sense that a lot of people on YouTube would be right-wing. What are we doing about that? I don't know if there is a way for the Democratic Party to change that by themselves, because the people who own those platforms are extremely rich and powerful and well-connected. So if they want their algorithm to do that, their algorithm's going to do that. And I don't think that you or I could start like a whisper campaign or flood YouTube with progressive content to combat that. What we can do is talk to people in person. We can talk to everybody that we know and the people that already love and trust us and respect us, and try to convince them and try to change their minds. All right. Every time I'm about to, you know what's been happening lately, guys? When I'm getting ready to pop off the live stream is right when I start having an influx of really excellent questions, you know? So then I get really tired. My Groovacious Final says, when they say white, they mean white. Yeah, you know, there's identity politics shit there. There's culture war shit in there. So yeah, it's white. Yeah. But I mean, I hope you guys enjoyed my extremely accurate answer about social media and shit. Alrighty. Brooklyn says no. No to what? Brooklyn? Let's see here. Yeah. We're talking about white people. Okay, King Desert Loner says, what do you think of Trump signing Bankruptcy Administration Improvement Act of 2025? I don't know anything about that. I need to read up on that. Let's see here. They flag you for saying white on TikTok? Alrighty, let's see here. Falling Box says, there is a peaceful populist right that does not like MAGA and wants to unite with the populist left. Well, then they should do that. Falling Box, where are the places that we have, what do you call it? That we have agreements? And are those people on the peaceful populist right willing to vote for Democrats in order to communicate to the Republican Party that they do not want them to be MAGA any longer? Falling Box, let me know what you think about that. Real Bendis says, thoughts on the NYC snowball fight, not criminal in my view. Yeah, from what I read and reporting, it seems like it got a little out of hand, but I definitely don't think it needs to be a fucking federal case. Legendary Pain says, do you think the MAGA leaders like kids a little bit too much? I think there are definitely people in that group that do, 100%. User, a whole bunch of numbers, says, what's SS? Social Security. Okay. John Abbott says, real ID is only proof of citizenship in 5 states. Minnesota is one of the 5 states where Real ID proves citizenship. Well, that is ironic, John Abbott. All right, everybody, we are going to start wrapping things up. Tooch says, in your opinion, where would I get more accurate information, Blue Sky or X? Blue Sky, 100%. X is a fucking wasteland. It is right-wing propaganda. It is complete and utter fucking bullshit. It is a misinformation and propaganda machine that is designed to get people to vote for Republicans or not vote at all. Okay, let's see here. If you want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know that we're all struggling, but if you have the means and you have the desire, the mechanisms are there. You can send gifts on TikTok, you can send bits and emotes on Twitch. And in fact, I just added a whole bunch of new emotes to the Twitch, so I would love to hear from you Twitch heads and let me know if you see them, if you like them, if you want more shit like that. You can become a super fan on TikTok, and if we get a bunch of super fans on TikTok, then maybe we'll do special like super fan activities. You can also become a subscriber on Twitch, and if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe to my Twitch channel for $0. $0 helps, totally free for you, helps me out a ton. And you can also join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Special thank you to all of my regular financial contributors: Robert, Shannon, Carmine, Patrick, Melissa, the two Seans, Dan Blackroyd, Pliff, Triska Musking, and It's the Rocketeer. Falling Box says no wars, check. Reveal Epstein files, check. No Congress stock trading, check. No big money in politics, etc. So Falling Box, here's the problem that I have with this, which is that the Republican Party itself is not against those things. If you are a right-leaning populist who wants those things, you have to be willing to vote for Democrats in order to make it happen. That is the only way that is going to be accomplished. Let me know what you think about that, my guy. Seaflon says, every time I find myself leaning the other direction, both sides act terrible during the State of the Union. I don't think the Democrats acted terrible during the State of the Union, Seaflon. Did you have a problem with people's activity, Seaflon? Mia's LV Adventure says, I want to send the little one a gift. Oh, that's very sweet of you. That is very, very sweet of you. Mia's LV Adventures for the baby shower. I wonder if it would be gauche for me to tell you guys where we're registered for the baby shower. It feels gauche. I'm not going to do that. Never mind. All right. Falling Box says, thank you for chatting. By the way, I agree. Republican Party is not for that right now, and it sucks. So, Falling Box, are you going to vote for Democrats in the future? Do you know other right-wing people who are going to vote for Democrats in the future? You know? Yeah, but again, Triska, if I put it in the Discord, it just feels like I'm asking for donations. I don't know. There's something about it that kind of creeps me out. I'll consider it. I'll see what the missus says, you know. Okay. If there are any questions that I was not able to get to on the live stream, DMs are open. I do not want you to be shy about reaching out to me. I want you to reach out to me. I want to be a resource for you guys to be more informed and more involved in politics. So if there's anything I can do, use me and abuse me. Use me until you use me up. My DMs are open. You can email me through my website, and you can hit me up on my Discord channel, which is double great because there's recommendations there for books, podcasts, civilian action, nonprofit organizations. It is a great resource. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. What's up, Diego PK over on YouTube? Seaflon says, not being able to agree that American people come before immigrants isn't terrible, question mark. You know, Seaflon, I'm going to engage with you on this because I know that you're a good person, that you're one of my regulars, but I don't think that that's what Democrats sitting during that section was communicating, because Donald Trump was saying, dance for me. Donald Trump was saying, let me show you that I can make these Democrats stand up and applaud my psychotic, for immigration policy. And so the Democrats are saying, no, we're not playing this game. We are not going to allow you to use us for your fucking propaganda narratives. So I have zero problem with them not standing for that. Rem V, Triska, D. Scott, Kim Buckman, thank you so much for helping me reach my final gift goal of the day. Alrighty, let's see here. P. Who says, would you say that if someone supports Trump's after the e-files release, they're probably a PDF too? I know it's really easy to say that, but I don't know. I think that we should give voters the benefit of the doubt and let them know, I am willing to give every single Republican voter the benefit of the doubt of I just existed in a media bias environment that did not show me any of this material that I am currently viewing now and has changed my mind. Sean says, why do American leftists support political violence? They don't, Sean. Falling Box says, what if the left moved on no wars and the right moved on socialized healthcare? The left doesn't need to move on no wars, Falling Box. The left is there. I would like you to recognize, Falling Box, that the way that the Democratic Party is consistently being bullied into increasing funding for the Pentagon and being hawkish or tough in foreign affairs or, overly hyping up the military is because America has a view of the Democratic Party as being weak on national security and weak on the military. And so they're trying to change that narrative. I think that's a bad idea. But what else are you supposed to fucking do when the billionaire class has been flooding the fucking airwaves for the last 60 fucking years, calling you a bunch of fucking wimps and weenies for not supporting things like the war in Iraq, So I really think people need to recognize how effective these propaganda narratives have been, not only in convincing people that Democrats are worse than they actually are, but in actually causing the Democratic Party to be worse than they want to be. Alrighty, Burnt Toast says violence is necessary for revolution. I completely disagree with that, Burnt Toast. I do not condone any kind of violence. I condemn it in the strongest possible language. And if you check out a political scientist named Erica Chenoweth, she's done a bunch of research to suggest that non-violent protest movements are more successful and productive than violent ones. Burnt Toast, if the state has a monopoly on violence, then you have to challenge them with violence. Again, Burnt Toast, I completely disagree. I am not going to fight you on whether or not we should be violent or not. If you continue caping for violence, I am going to block you. That is just the rules. Those are the rules of my live stream. We do not advocate for violence on my live stream. User says, do you think guns should be banned? If I had my druthers, I would. I do not believe that the majority of Americans want that, or even that the majority of Democrats want that. So, Falling Box says, good, then we are closer than I thought. I totally acknowledge that billionaire class warps our views. That it sounds like we're fucking, peas in a pod here, Falling Box. And the fact that you somehow, it sounds like you associate yourself with the right wing as opposed to the left wing. Where's the disconnect there? Why is it that I call myself a progressive Democrat and you call yourself a populist right person? Let's see here. Emojis says opinion on John Brown. I don't know who that is. Burnt Toast says revolution isn't a dinner party. Okay, Burnt Toast. Again, I'm not going to support violence. I'm not going to advocate for violence, and I'm not going to allow people to do that in my live stream. Sean says, why do a large portion of American leftists support political violence? They don't, Sean. Always sad but true says, the problem is that the Republican messaging is so blatant, corrupt, and misleading, and extremely well-funded as well. Scrolling down to the bottom, says, opinion on the New York mayor. I like Mamdani a lot. I think we need more politicians like him. Pihu says, I low-key love how you can disagree with opinions I do. Is stimulating without causing harm. Thank you for that. Thank you, Pihu. But let's talk about what we disagree with. Burnt Toast says, they do Sean. I don't know what that means. Sean says, I saw it with my own eyes after Charlie got killed and the attempts on Trump. Okay, so Burnt Toast and Sean, just want to let you know, you guys are sus as hell. I do not believe that you are here in good faith. Prove to me that you are here in good faith. And let us engage on the idea of political violence. Do you accept my terms? Let me know in the comments. Okay, let's see here. User, a whole bunch of numbers, says, thoughts on Kirk assassination and the response from the left. Burnt Toast says that he's here in good faith. I'm waiting for Sean. And then I will answer both of those questions at the same time. Emojis asks, are you more leftist or liberal? I would call myself a leftist. I'm sure that there are some people on the left who would call me a liberal because they think I'm, a tool of the corporate Democratic Party. I'm not. So Falling Box says free market capitalism versus socialism, individualism versus collectivism. Interesting, Falling Box. So that's where you find yourself more in the right as opposed to the left. Very, very interesting. Okay, so we got user a bunch of numbers asking me about Kirk. We got Burnt Toast saying here in good faith. And Sean says he is here in good faith. Okay, all right, guys. here's the deal. There is more right-wing political violence than there is left-wing political violence. That is coming from the FBI, which is very much not a left-wing organization. There are way more people on the right who have big megaphones, like elected politicians and talking heads like Ben Shapiro and Alex Jones and shit like that, who are openly calling for violence and are encouraging their base to do violence. And I personally believe, and I wish that Jack Smith had an opportunity to prove it in court, that a bunch of people in the Trump coalition were actively conspiring to create violence at the end of his first term. So yeah, there is more violence against left-wing people than right-wing people. There is more violence being perpetuated by right-wing people than left-wing people. The people who have big megaphones on the left are not calling for violence. The people with big megaphones on the right are calling for violence. So where do you think the left wants violence more than the right? Because if it's just on social media, you answered your own question there, because social media is lies. Social media is misinformation and propaganda. It's complete and utter violence. Alrighty. User a bunch of numbers says violence on both sides. That is inaccurate. User a bunch of numbers. Emoji says favorite current bipartisan bill. I don't have that off the top of my head, so sorry about that. Pihu says, I was just wondering how someone could still support a PDF if they're not one. They see Trump saying that the files have exonerated him, and then they just believe it. User a whole bunch of numbers says, that doesn't justify violence, saying that the right commits violence. I never said it did. David Douglas says, well, the last couple of decades have been free market capitalism, and it doesn't work for everyone. I completely agree with that, David Douglas. But I also wouldn't agree that it's free market capitalism. I believe that we have been living through crony capitalism. User a whole bunch of numbers says, so a leftist person has never committed violence for political reasons? Never said that. Never said that. Never said that. User 27, you're strawmanning me. Thank you. All right, let's get to Sean's comments. I can see on college campuses leftists calling for a violent revolution, even in this comment section, and the recent political assassinations. Okay, so first of all, Sean, I don't know if you're a real person. And what you are saying is anecdotal evidence, which means that you can't show me like a study to confirm the thing that you just said. So a random anonymous person on the internet is telling me that they saw something. That is not evidence. That is not evidence. And you mentioned the recent political assassinations. You're talking about someone taking a shot at Donald Trump. You're talking about somebody killing Charlie Kirk. Well, what about the judge that ruled against Trump getting their house fucking burned down by a right-wing person? What about the 2 state senators in Minnesota getting fucking got right by right-wing people, Sean? You want to go tit for tat, we can. Or we can just ask, I don't know, the country's premier law enforcement organization if they have crunched the numbers for us and let us know, is more violence coming out of the right than the left? All right, scrolling down the bottom, Captain Cam says, do you think actual socialism is possible through reform? I think it depends on what you mean by socialism. I don't know anybody who is like a serious person who is advocating for like a totalitarian, maximalist, full socialist United States government. But I do know a lot of people who want socialized programs, for example, and I'm definitely down for that. Okay, Falling Box says, I know using big commentators is tough because no one likely agrees with all of what they say. Is that a second comment, Phil? Let's see here. Burnt Toast says, leftists call for revolution, which is inherently authoritarian and violent. You were doing that, Burnt Toast. You know what? You are so fucking full of shit, man. I should have blocked you the second I smelled it on you, Sean says, do you think the rise of communism or fascism is more of a threat to the rest? To the West, fascism. We are so much closer to falling under fascism in this country than we are to falling under communism. Like we are steps away from falling under fascist rule. And I don't even see fucking communism on the fucking horizon. And I'm standing up high. Emojis asks, are there any Democratic policies that you disagree with? Yeah, but the thing with the Democratic Party is that it's a big tent and it represents a wide swath of political beliefs. Like you have a growing majority of elected Democrats who are voting against sending money and weapons to Israel. But you still have people like Chuck Schumer, who is extremely pro-Israel. And so, like, I'm a progressive Democrat. I do not agree with the centrists, the corporate Democrats who are continuing to cape for Israel and Netanyahu. Generally speaking, I don't know if there's a lot of daylight between my political beliefs and the general Democratic platform, or more specifically, the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. But I do have a lot of disagreements with the centrist wing of the Democratic Party. Scoot Pio says, what do you think about national conservatism? I don't really know. Yeah, I don't know if the political party I'm thinking of is national conservatism or if it's something completely different. Sean says, thoughts on Hitler's socialism? Hitler was not a socialist. He was a fascist. David Douglas says, Democrats are too beholden to big tech and banks. I disagree with that, David Douglas. Politicians need money in order to run campaigns, and so Democrats take money from every place that they can get. But if you're looking for the party that is part of their platform and part of their governing history is regulating big tech and banks, that's the Democratic Party. All right, Emojis asks, what should I call you, Emojis? Should I call you Emojis, or do you have a name? Emojis asks, favorite current Republican policy or any that you agree with? I would love for somebody to tell me a Republican policy that is not just cutting taxes for the rich, because I haven't seen it. I have not seen it. All right, Emojis it is. User27 says, is there anything positive Trump has done since the start of his term? Not as far as I can see. Sean says, they collectivized businesses and restricted private property. He was quite socialist at least. Oh, Hitler. No, Sean. I don't buy it. Sean. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see here. Savage Alley says, how do you feel about the parallels of Hitler and Donald Trump? I think that there's a lot of them. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that there are so many. My apologies to everybody over on YouTube and Twitch who I've been ignoring. Flonk Sauce says, do you follow Pearlmania? I do, and I fucking love him. Diego, you are from Belgium. Welcome. All right, scrolling down. Tooch says, if Scarborough and Maddow are far left, Scarborough is not far left. He used to be a Republican. And Tim Pool and Patrick are far right. Where would you put Megyn Kelly? Far right as well. John Abbott says, revolution requires violence was once true, but modern technology has changed everything. I agree with that, but I also don't know if revolution ever required violence. JP says, I don't support violence on my live stream. Why don't I support violence? Yeah, hell yeah. Average Joe says, what the heliante? My class was canceled. You're still going. LOL. Yeah, I was going to leave. I did my outro, and I just got a whole bunch of really good questions, and so I just decided to stay. I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for these live streams. User27 says, do Dems think borders are secure and that deporting illegal immigrants is bad? No, Democrats do not believe that. Democrats do not believe that deporting the worst of the worst illegal immigrants is bad. And the idea that they do is Republican lies. Savage Alley says, thoughts on Brennan Lee Mulligan? Isn't he the dude from Dropout? He's like the DM. He seems cool as hell. User a whole bunch of numbers says, what about all illegal immigrants? I don't think that we should cut off our nose to spite our face. I do not believe that we should deport illegal immigrants who are a net positive on this country. So let us be cool, you know? For the wealthy, for the rich and powerful, we are always bending the law and being loosey-goosey about, well, they did this, but really this person's a good person, you know. If a fucking white kid from Duke fucking SA's a girl, then we find every fucking excuse to let them off the hook. If a fucking white dude brings an AR-15 across state lines and murders 3 people, then we fucking bend over backwards to bend the law for them. But an immigrant who is a valuable member of their society is contributing more to the tax resources of America than they are taking away. Why do we have to be fucking strict? Why do we have to be so fucking strict? Sticklers. Why do we have to be so fucking sticklers about the law in that situation and not when rich people are fucking stealing all of our money and shit like that? Alrighty. Falling Box says, an example of populists coming together could be close to Cenk and Dave Smith coming together. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to fully endorse that because there are things that Cenk does that I fucking hate. And I don't really know Dave Smith shit all that well, but if I'm remembering correctly, he's a pretty far right wing guy. But hopefully there can be, so long as the end result is people voting for Democrats, I don't care. Because that's where the rubber fucking meets the road. Like, I don't really give a shit if Cenk and Dave get together, but if they agree that nobody should vote because they don't like who won the primary, then they can fuck off and die, Sean says, do you think certain immigration policies can be unhealthy for a nation? I suppose. I haven't really seen our current immigration policies is unhealthy for the nation. Allowing ICE and CPB to ignore the law while we tripled their budget, and they're being led by one of the most blatantly racist human beings on the planet, where they're illegally detaining and torturing and murdering and sexually assaulting people who have done absolutely fucking nothing wrong. Yeah, that is fucking unhealthy for this nation. That's for fucking sure. Alrighty. Pihu says, should just be able to get the documentation. What about all the illegals? Do Dems over did that one? User says, how are they being illegally detained? How could they be detained legally? So you are not allowed to just arrest anybody that you want. You have to let them know why you are arresting them, and you have to read them their rights. You have to identify yourselves so that you can be held accountable if you do shady things. And that is exactly what ICE is doing. They are masked up, so we have no idea who the fuck they are. It looks like a kidnapping because they're not saying we're the police and we're arresting you for this. They're just fucking grabbing people and throwing them into cars. That is a massive violation. That is wildly illegal. Let alone, all the fucking shit that's happening in the fucking detention centers that are inhumane and illegal. All right. Brian B says, but Trump is winning so much, LOL. I hope you're being sarcastic. Uncle Hippie says, and you can't burst down doors without a warrant. That is also true. Savage Ally says, do you feel that your mental health daily thoughts have shifted in a bad way recently? I have a very consistent and aggressive self-care strategy. If I have any flaws, it's that I do too much for my own self-care. There's so little that has to happen before I'm like, I'm gonna take a day off, So yeah, I have a gym that I go to that has a hot plunge and a cold plunge and a sauna. I regularly engage in gardening activities. Wink, wink. I go to the movies. I watch TV with my wife. We eat delicious food. I hang out with my friends. Sometimes I go to a game night. There are so many things that I do to try to reset after having watched the news for, however many hours or read the news and gotten really fucking, depressed and upset about shit. And so, yeah, I don't worry about that because, again, I just fully dive into the pool of taking care of my own heart and emotions and my own noodle. And I would encourage everybody to do that. I would encourage everybody to get out there and do the work and try to fucking help and be informed, and then also take time for yourself so that you can refresh. And remember that part of the resistance is joy. Part of the resistance is us enjoying the work that we're doing and our lives. When I am taking a nice walk with my extremely pregnant wife and we are giggling and we're singing songs to our still in utero baby, like, that is resistance. That is a giant fuck you to Trump and the billionaire class. Like, you cannot kill the joy of my life. And then you get back into it. And then you get back in and you do the work. And you do the work. All right, Falling Box says, does your version of the Democratic Party admit that there should have been an open primary in 24. You know what, Falling Box? I'm going to challenge you on that. You know, we've only got 60 people watching right now. I've done almost two. I never go this long, but I don't know. I'm just fucking, I'm feeling good about the direction of this live stream. So, Falling Box, let's talk about 24. Are you ready? Are you ready to talk about 24, man? Brian B says, I was, and keep the conversation going. Truth to power. Keep it up. Thank you, David Douglas. Thank you. Kimberlina says, wait until she's in your arms. I believe that is going to be an emotional nuclear bomb, because I already feel really strongly just about my wife's belly. And so if I feel this kind of love just for a bump on my wife's fucking uterus, a massive bump, but a bump nonetheless, that I'm sure that once it's a fucking baby, I'm going to lose my mind. I'll probably turn into a fucking puddle. All right, Falling Bucks. You think there should have been an open primary in 24. How do you think that should have worked? Because there wasn't time. There was 107 days. So do you think that they should have had like one big election in all 50 states? Do you think it should have been at the convention? Like, how would that have worked exactly? Because I do not believe that there could have been a primary in 24. And if you want to come up and say this with your voice instead of typing it, Falling Box, you can, 100%. Just let me know if that's easier for you. All right. So, yes, it is my first child. Pihu says, what can minors do just to detox from this horrifying news? Me and a lot of my classmates are scared. Yeah, you know, it's tough. It really is tough. There have to be things that you guys like. There have to be video games or concerts or albums, or just, you know what I wanted to do when I was a kid? I just wanted to fucking get in my car with all my friends, drive to a fucking parking lot, and fucking shoot the shit there, you know? And then maybe that's something that you guys can get into as well. There is another thing, and it's not great because it is directly involved with politics still. So if you're looking for like a full exit, you don't want to do this. But volunteering is a way that a lot of people feel better about this, because they're doing something instead of just sitting in their, you know, their house, just like stressing out and losing their fucking minds. You know, the 3 rules for feeling better are go outside, move your body, and talk to people. And volunteering does all of those things, in addition to potentially, you know, being part of the solution. Right. Pihu says, I do volunteer at a children's hospital and cancer research. Oh, I love that. You know? Yeah, I mean, volunteering is great. You can do it for politics, but you can also volunteer at an animal shelter. You know? That can be a really good way to unwind as well. All right. Falling Box, still waiting on your thing. Again, you are free to come up if you like. Sean says, do you think the rise in trans cases from 2019-24 was a case of mass social hysteria? No, I think that we just recognized that this was a category of human being and created space for them to explore this, and so lots of people did. Alrighty, let's see here. User 27 says, are puberty blockers legal in America? Yes, they are for now, but the Trump administration is trying to make it difficult for kids to be, for anybody to be trans. Let's see here. Savage. Falling Box, still waiting for your reply. Scrolling down, still waiting on Savage. Let's check it over here. We got Tooch. Says, are you going to sign your new baby up for the Trump seed money, $1,000? Or do you hate Trump so much that you refuse the money? I don't hate Trump so much that I refuse the money. I just don't trust him. I don't trust him with my information. I don't trust him. I don't trust that he will send me $1,000. You know? So it's possible. It's possible that we do that, but I would need to see what they are asking for in return, because everything that Trump does is a way for him to get more money and power. David Douglas says, do you see Newsom trying to say Dems are too woke supporting trans rights? That's a little bit not what he said, David Douglas. And so I think we need to be very specific in what we're saying. Like, I don't believe that Newsom is saying we should not support trans rights. I believe that he was saying that we should focus on kitchen table issues. And yeah, you know, he's making the centrist play for presidency, so you know it makes sense that he would say that. I don't love Gavin Newsom. I'm definitely not voting for him in the primary. But if he wins, I'm gonna be fucking caping for that dude 24/7. Alrighty. John Abbott says, "You go to a gym that has a hot plunge. Does your wife know that?" She does, because the gym I go to is separated by sex. So I'm just sitting in the hot tub with a bunch of dudes, anyways, and that does not bother her one tick. Tooch says, "Is there anyone in Trump's cabinet that you think is good for America? Maybe Rubio." No, Rubio is a massive piece of shit. Tooch. John Abbott says, have you in the past played any D&D or other tabletop role-playing games? Yes, my wife and I, we did a really long role-playing game. We had a regular Monday role-playing game. It was live streamed. It is still available to watch, though there's a lot of faffing about on there, so I don't know if I would really recommend anybody to watch, but there's a creator on YouTube named Nathan Napalm. He was our DM. He put everything on his channel. Great guy, big fan of his. And so, yeah, I would just tell everybody to go check that out. I was just reported for harassment and bullying, which, again, I would love it if somebody would show me where it was, because... Savage Alley says, "That's why you're so familiar. Are you a fan of Nathan Napalm? Did you used to listen to that live stream?" David Douglas says, "Yes, but it was stepping on a rake to go after people who will never vote for him." I generally agree with that. Sean says, "What is unique about the West compared to other civilizations?" Horses, I think. I think horses and us bringing diseases to non-Western civilizations probably gave us an advantage. Read guns, germs, and steel. Let's see here. All right. Oi, 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 oi. Where are you? Yeah, Falling Box, still waiting on your response. D. Scott says, "I love that. Can you record it for us to keep?" Record what? I forget what I was talking about back then. Savage Ally. So tell me, were you a fan of Nathan Napalm? Did you hear? Tell me all the things, Savage Ally. I want to hear about that. Falling Boxes, I sent a couple. Oh, it might have gotten deleted. Falling Box, because I don't see anything. The last thing I see from you was congratulating me on my wife being pregnant. Yeah, I think it got deleted or something. I think maybe it got, what do you call it? It got zooted out because of some words maybe were bad in there or something like that. Guest requests. That's where we're at. Okay. Stepping away and loving your timeouts. There we go, Falling Box. Yeah, I didn't see your request, so sorry about that. Alrighty. What's up, my guy or gal?
Hey there, can you hear me?
I absolutely can. All right, so yeah, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. The question is, what do you think that primary should look like in 24 with 107 days left until the election?
Yeah, I mean, in short, I don't think there should have only been 107 days left to the election. I think Biden probably should have backed out sooner.
Okay.
And people surrounding him should have been more upfront and honest about
100% agree. 100% agree. Absolutely.
And if that happened, then inherently there would have been more time for an open primary.
Totally agree with that. So a couple things. Number one, there was a primary when it was just Biden and Harris, and obviously they won that primary. But then after he dropped out, is there something you think the Democratic Party should have done different than what they did?
I don't think Kamala presented very well in general, but I think one of the biggest drawbacks was her having a few opportunities to separate herself from Biden and failing to do so, in my opinion.
All right, well, we can get into the problems that Kamala Harris had with her campaign, but your comment very specifically was about the Democratic Party admitting that they should have had a primary in 24. And I think that is a little bit of an unfair reading of the situation, unfair to the Democratic Party. And one of the things that really gets my goat, and the reason why I do these live streams, is because I find that the majority of Americans have too critical of an attitude towards the Democrats and then not critical enough attitude towards the Republican Party. And so when I see these narratives, I'm like, I'm like, is there a solution there? Is there something the Democratic Party could have done in that specific situation that you think they need to ask forgiveness for, or something like that? You know?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, to use like just an example more from the media than the political parties, like Jake Tapper's whole book coming out after everything is exposed and hit the fan, he kind of pretends that he was critical all along.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think that's an example of going along with the party for too long when it was obvious that something should have changed. I feel like if there's still people that are defending that, I don't know if I could get behind a Democratic Party that is still defending that.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Did you read Jake Tapper's book?
I did not read the whole book, no.
Okay, so I read the book, and it is clear that when you read the book, there is a handful of people who were in charge of Biden during his administration and who were just like flat out fucking lying to everybody about him. And they were saying he's running circles around us, blah, blah, blah. The book is not an indictment of the Democratic Party. The book is an indictment of like Jill Biden and Biden's immediate staff, who were basically hiding his condition from America and doing things that made it seem as though he was more with it than he was, like agreeing to that fucking debate with Donald Trump,
Yeah.
So it's not as though everybody was like, oh, we gotta keep this information from the American public. It's that Biden told us that he's good. His team is saying that he's good, and he's the fucking president. So I guess we just believe them. When it became clear that this was an untenable situation, the Democratic Party put pressure on Biden to drop out of the race. That is 100% what they should have done. And so I guess, again, I'm just seeing this sort of like veneer of criticism of the Democratic Party that is like, it's hazy and it's sloppy and it doesn't seem fair to me. Do you know what I mean?
I could see that, and I agree that it was the tightest group around Biden that was protecting and controlling that narrative. Mm-hmm. Like, I think you're totally right. I just think it was more obvious than that, where people should have been able to stand up before it was the cool thing and the politically okay thing to do.
Well, I'll push back on that.
I just generally wish that more of our politicians took principled stances versus just going with the party. I know that's not how you get somewhere in politics. So, like, generally, this is all coming from, like, I support the anti-establishment view, and I think that just going with the party to get along is dangerous and too many people do it, and I wish more people took principled stances in politics.
Okay, so I completely agree with you on that, but I push back on the idea that the Democratic Party only pushed Biden out once it was cool and popular. Like, that was a fight in the Democratic Party. And you know who the people were that were saying that Biden shouldn't drop out? Bernie and AOC. So it wasn't the cool thing to suddenly be for Biden dropping out. There were people who were very passionate about him staying in the race. People who were more centrist and people who were more progressive were saying that.
After the debate?
After the debate, yeah. AOC said, she posted, it would be psychotic to try to have a primary. We have our nominee. Let's just win this race. I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the post exactly. Yeah. So listen, Falling Box, I am so glad that you are here. I hope that you come back to my lives again and again. I am very much enjoying engaging with you, but I gotta say,
as am I.
I think that a lot of people in this country have fallen for some misinformation about the political parties, and you seem like you got a really good head on your shoulders. I'm so glad that you are at least not, drinking the MAGA Kool-Aid or anything. No. But generally speaking, I think America never gives the Democratic Party any credit, and they never give the Republican Party any blame. The bar can never be raised high enough for the Democratic Party, and it cannot be lowered enough for the Republican Party. And there's a bunch of organic and inorganic reasons for this, I think. And so generally when I hear these narratives that I think are like unfairly dragging the Democrats through the mud, then I try to, correct the record. And I hope that you are open to hearing this and don't think that I'm being a dick for saying it.
No, you're definitely not, and I think I agree with that in general. I don't know if it would be as general as the bar is always too high for Democrats and always too low for Republicans. But I get the case you're making, and I think I agree with it broadly. And I definitely am not drinking the MAGA fire hose. I mean,
I'm happy to hear that.
I don't know how anyone is anymore. He's essentially gone against every supposed promise he said on his campaign trail has now been broken in the first year. I don't know how anyone can see that and still believe the words that are coming out of his mouth.
I completely agree with you, my man. But listen, I really enjoyed chatting about this, and I'm going to start wrapping things up. So, yeah, definitely come back for another live stream, my guy.
Yeah, for sure will. I appreciate you chatting, man.
All right, man. Okay. Tooch says, I would love to see you on Jubilee. I watched Destiny destroy those conservatives, and you would do the same. I'm actually really curious about going on Jubilee because I don't debate. And so I wonder what their opinion would be of me trying to do my version of good faith engagement instead of just trying to, like, win or own or destroy the conservatives. Because that would not be what I would be doing there. I would just be, like, trying to find out why they think the way they think and then try to give them, like, accurate information, D. Scott says, Jubilee is trash. Rage bait for clicks. I generally agree with that, D. Scott. I think it's an open question about whether or not it's a net positive, because I do think it's better that people are hearing arguments about politics and like learning about it. But yeah, the fightiness of it, the politics of sport of it, the teamness of it, yeah, it is fucking trash. Carlin was right, says, even though the presidency in general was never too progressive, Kamala was incredibly progressive. I've heard arguments on both sides of that, and I honestly don't know where I fall about if Kamala was more or less progressive than other political candidates. But I will push back and say that the Biden presidency was progressive. And whether or not he was the one actually pulling the strings and doing that, his administration ran as a progressive presidency. It was as though we had a fucking FDR in office right there. And that is part of the reason why I thought it was a pretty darn good administration. All right, everybody. I cannot believe how long I went for. Almost 2 hours. Good Lord. Thanks, everybody, for being here. So please do the work, everybody. We need to recruit people. We need to convince people. We need to protest and strike and boycott. This is a numbers game, and we got to get more votes than the bad guys. That's how we win. So do the work. And be good to each other. You don't have to be a dick to do the work. Be good to yourselves. Remember to do the self-care. And whatever self-care is to you, I like going to the gym and doing a hot cold plunge. Some people, it might be something completely different, going to see a baseball game or whatever. That would not be my self-care. Though I'm sure I would enjoy it on some level. It would not be my self-care. So yeah, take care of yourselves. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for the last live stream of the week. Same bat time, same bat channel. We got some new friends today. Very excited about that. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye.